A few steps away from Boston's Faneuil Hall, often nicknamed America's Cradle of Liberty, stands a site where merchants sold enslaved Africans, whom they had trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean from West Africa to North America. While frequently recognized as a place of debate and protest during the American Revolution and subsequent social revolutions, this building also serves as a reminder of the wealth amassed by the port city of Boston from the transatlantic trade, which included the selling of enslaved Africans. From the 1500s to the 1800s, merchants transported approximately 12 million Africans across the Atlantic as human property. This trafficking of humans was called the Middle Passage. The most common routes formed what is now known as the Triangle Trade, connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas. From 1560 to 1850, about 4.8 million enslaved people were transported to Brazil, 4.7 million were sent to the Caribbean, and at least 388,000, or 4% of those who survived the Middle Passage, arrived in North America. Between 1700 and 1808, the most active years of the international slave trade, merchants transported around 40% of enslaved Africans in British and American ships. The voyage across the Atlantic Ocean lasted roughly 80 days on ships ranging from small schooners to massive, purpose-built slave ships. Ship crews packed humans together on or below decks without space to sit up or move around. No regard was given for the captives, as food was meager, sanitary conditions were filthy, and torture was used to keep captives under control. Without ventilation or sufficient water, about 15% of enslaved Africans grew sick and died during the Middle Passage. In addition to the physical violations enslaved people suffered, they were ripped away from their families, homelands, social positions, and languages. The first enslaved African in the British colonies arrived at Jamestown in 1619. However, the New England colonies played an important role in this global economic story. The first slave trade voyage, a trip specifically intended for the trafficking of people to the colonies, sailed out of Massachusetts. The ship Desire left Salem in 1637, carrying Native American captives from the Pequot War to be sold in the Caribbean. When it returned up the coast with the first known Africans brought into the northern English colonies, it most likely anchored in Boston. It is estimated that 166 transatlantic voyages embarked out of Boston. Local newspapers carried over 1,000 ads for the sale of enslaved people during the 1700s, which took place everywhere from ships to markets, warehouses, coffeehouses, and homes. Boston was further complicit in the slave trade as a major exporter of rum made from sugar produced in the Caribbean by enslaved workers, and sometimes sold in exchange for enslaved Africans. Ironically, taxes on items such as sugar and molasses drove colonists to revolution, with colonial leaders comparing British tax policy to slavery, even as the trade continued to prop up slavery itself. Africans brought a vast cultural and linguistic diversity to the English colonies when they arrived in North America. Many food traditions, music, and religious rituals still present in the United States have been traced back to African roots. In the years leading up to the American Revolution, enslaved people called for their own freedom as colonial leaders spoke about liberty from the crown. However, slavery still flourished in the United States until the American Civil War, becoming the defining issue of national political life. The U.S. Constitution banned the African slave trade in 1808, but the last documented slave ship to arrive in the United States came to Mobile, Alabama in 1860. Slavery in the South and second-class citizenship in the North became legacies of a history that began with the Middle Passage.